My brother opened a second business. I was arrested for fraud because he opened accounts in my name. I was sitting in a holding cell when I realized my brother had stolen my entire identity, and the worst part was that everyone believed I'd done it to myself. The detective who arrested me, Lieutenant Harding, 23 years with the fraud division, had looked at me with something close to pity when he said, "You really thought you could use your own name?" I remember laughing, because the absurdity was so complete that my brain couldn't process it any other way. My hands were still cuffed behind my back, the metal cold against my wrists, and I could smell the stale coffee and industrial cleaner that seemed to coat everything in that precinct. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and somewhere down the hall, someone was screaming about their innocence. I wasn't screaming yet, but I would be soon enough. For 8 years, I'd worked as a senior accountant at Brennan & Associates, a mid-sized firm that handled corporate tax prep and financial consulting. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable. I had a small house in the suburbs, drove a reliable Toyota Camry, paid my bills on time, and maintained a credit score in the high 700s. My life was predictable in the best possible way. Wake up, gym, work, home, repeat. My younger brother, Liam, had always been different. Where I was methodical and careful, he was impulsive and charismatic. He'd bounced between jobs for most of his adult life, always chasing the next big idea, the next opportunity that would finally make him successful. I'd bailed him out financially more times than I could count, always with the same lecture about responsibility and planning. He'd nod, thank me, promise to do better. And I believed him, because that's what brothers do. That was my first mistake. The trouble started on a Thursday morning in late September. I'd just finished a quarterly review for one of our biggest clients when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, local area code. "Is this Nathan Harlow?" the woman asked. Her voice was professional, clipped. "Yes, that's me," I said, already pulling up my calendar to see if I'd missed an appointment. "This is Angela Freeman from First National Bank. I'm calling about your business account ending in 8834. We've noticed some unusual activity and wanted to verify some recent transactions." I felt my stomach do a small flip. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. I don't have a business account with First National." There was a pause, and I could hear typing on the other end. "According to our records, you opened this account 6 months ago. The business is registered as Harlow Consulting, LLC. My mouth went dry. "I never opened that account. I don't have an LLC. Angela Freeman walked me through the details with the kind of patience that made it clear she'd had this conversation before. The account had been opened in April with my social security number, driver's license information, and what appeared to be my digital signature. There were deposits totaling just over $85,000 and withdrawals that left the current balance at negative $1,200. I was looking at the wall of my office, watching the second hand on the clock tick forward, and nothing was making sense. "I need to see the paperwork," I said. "Of course. We'll need you to come in and file a fraud report. Can you make it today?" I cleared my calendar and drove to the bank in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The entire time, I kept thinking this had to be some kind of administrative error, that someone had transposed a number or pulled the wrong file. It couldn't be real. The branch manager, a man named David Kellerman who'd been with the bank for 15 years, sat across from me in a small conference room and spread out the documents like he was laying down cards in a poker game. There was my signature, or something so close to it that I had to look twice. There was my driver's license number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name as a security question. "This is identity theft," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "Someone used my information to open this account." Kellerman nodded slowly. "We'll need to start an investigation. You'll need to file a police report and submit an affidavit of fraud. In the meantime, the account will be frozen." He slid a packet of forms across the table. "Do you have any idea who might have had access to your personal information?" I opened my mouth to say no, and then closed it. Because there was one person who had access to everything, had stayed at my house multiple times, knew where I kept my important documents, had borrowed my laptop more than once. My brother. I didn't want to believe it. Even as I drove to the police station, even as I filed the report with Officer Rita Danvers, who took down every detail with methodical efficiency, I kept telling myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe Liam had been the victim too. Maybe someone had stolen both our identities. I called him that evening, and he picked up on the third ring. "Hey Nate, what's up?" His voice was cheerful, relaxed. "We need to talk," I said. "Someone opened a business account using my information. Have you noticed anything weird lately? Any suspicious activity?" There was a pause that lasted maybe 2 seconds too long. "No, man. Nothing like that. That's crazy, though. You think someone hacked your stuff?" We talked for another 10 minutes, and he said all the right things. Concern, outrage, offers to help. But that pause kept echoing in my head. When we hung up, I sat in my living room and stared at my phone, and something cold settled in my chest. The next week, I received a call from Detective William Ashford, Financial Crimes Division. He had a voice like gravel, and an economy of words that made every sentence feel important. "Mr. Harlow, we've been looking into your fraud claim. I need you to come down to the station tomorrow morning. Bring any documentation you have regarding your finances for the past year. I took a personal day from work and showed up at 9 a.m. sharp with a folder full of bank statements, tax returns, and credit card bills. Ashford looked at them for maybe 30 seconds before he leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. Here's the situation. We've traced the deposits in that First National account. They came from multiple sources, personal loans, credit cards, and a line of credit, all opened in your name. The room felt like it was tilting. How many accounts are we talking about? I asked. Ashford consulted a printout. So far, we've identified 11 different accounts. Total amount borrowed, approximately $230,000. I couldn't breathe. $230,000. The number was so large it didn't feel real, like Monopoly money or a typo. I didn't open those accounts, I said, and my voice sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere else. I know this looks bad, but I'm the victim here. Someone stole my identity. Ashford studied me with the kind of neutral expression that cops probably practice in the mirror. Mr. Harlow, in my experience, identity theft cases fall into two categories. Either it's a stranger who bought your information on the dark web, or it's someone close to you, someone who knows your habits, has physical access to your documents, and can convincingly forge your signature. He tapped the folder. This wasn't some sophisticated hacking operation. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing and had intimate knowledge of your life. I thought about Liam, about all the times he'd crashed on my couch, the weekend he'd stayed at my place while I was on a business trip, the way he'd always been interested in my job, asking questions about financial systems and account procedures. I think I know who did this, I said quietly. Ashford leaned forward. I'm listening. I told him about Liam, about our history, about the timing of when he'd had access to my house and documents. Ashford took notes and asked follow-up questions. What did Liam do for work? Where did he live? Did he have a criminal record? He's tried to start businesses before, I said. Nothing ever worked out. He'd asked me for advice, for small loans. I always said yes. Ashford nodded slowly. And recently? Has he started any new ventures? I thought back over the past year. Liam had mentioned something about a new project, some kind of consulting business he was excited about. He'd been vague about the details, said he'd tell me more once things were more established. My stomach turned. He opened a business, I said. About 6 months ago. He said it was some kind of consulting firm. Ashford made a note. What's the name of the business? I racked my brain. I don't remember. He was always secretive about it, said he didn't want to jinx it. The detective stood up and grabbed his jacket. I need you to do something for me. Don't contact your brother. Don't tell him about this conversation. Can you do that? I nodded, even though every instinct in me wanted to call Liam and demand answers. We'll look into this, Ashford said. In the meantime, you need to contact all 3 credit bureaus and put a freeze on your credit. File a report with the Federal Trade Commission, and keep detailed records of everything. He handed me his card. If you think of anything else, call me immediately. I left the station feeling like I was watching my life from outside my body. Everything felt surreal, disconnected. I went home and spent 4 hours on the phone with credit bureaus, banks, and fraud departments. By the time I finished, it was dark outside, and I had a headache that felt like my skull was being crushed in a vice. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the dark, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't know what to do next. 3 days later, I got another call from Detective Ashford. We executed a search warrant on your brother's apartment this morning. My heart hammered against my ribs. And? We found documents, a lot of them. Falsified loan applications, copies of your driver's license, bank statements, tax returns. He had a whole filing system set up. Ashford's voice was matter of fact, like he was reading a grocery list. We also found his business registration. The company is called Harlow Strategic Solutions. He's been running it for 8 months, using the funds from the fraudulent accounts to pay for office space, equipment, employees. He even hired 3 people. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. So he did it. He actually did it. Yes, Ashford said. But here's where it gets complicated. Your brother is claiming you were business partners, that you knew about the accounts and helped him set everything up. He's saying this is a dispute between partners, not fraud. I stood up so fast my chair fell over backward. That's a lie. I never agreed to anything. I didn't even know the business existed until a week ago. I believe you, Ashford said. But we need to prove it. Do you have any emails or texts from your brother discussing the business? Any documentation showing he kept you in the dark? I pulled up my message history with Liam and scrolled back through months of conversations. There were texts about meeting up for drinks, asking how I was doing, random jokes and memes. Nothing about business, nothing about accounts or loans. No, I said. He never mentioned any of this. Ashford was quiet for a moment. Okay, here's what's going to happen. We're bringing charges against him for identity theft and fraud, but he's going to fight this, and his lawyer is going to paint you as a willing participant who got cold feet. You need to prepare yourself for that. I felt sick. What do I need to do? Get a lawyer, Ashford said. A good one. And start gathering any evidence that shows you had no knowledge of these accounts or the business. I hired an attorney named Patricia Olson, a sharp woman in her early 50s who specialized in fraud and identity theft cases. She'd been practicing law for 26 years and had a reputation for being relentless. Our first meeting was in her downtown office, a space with floor-to-ceiling windows and abstract art on the walls. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with serious dark eyes. "This is winnable, but it's going to be ugly. Your brother is going to try to discredit you, to make it look like you're trying to avoid debt. We need to establish a clear pattern of deception on his part and prove you had no knowledge or involvement." She pulled out a timeline. "Walk me through every interaction you've had with your brother over the past year. Every conversation, every visit, everything." I spent the next 2 hours recounting details I'd barely registered at the time. How Liam had asked to borrow my laptop to check his email, how he'd needed my address for some job application, how he'd taken a photo of my driver's license that one time when we were joking about fake IDs. Patricia made notes next to each incident, connecting dots I hadn't even seen. "He was methodical," she said. "This wasn't impulsive. He planned this." I felt a mixture of anger and grief so intense I could barely speak. "He's my brother," I said. "How could he do this to me?" Patricia's expression softened slightly. "People justify all kinds of things to themselves when they're desperate. He probably told himself he'd pay it back, that you'd never find out, that he was protecting you by keeping you ignorant. But intentions don't matter. Actions do." She slid a retainer agreement across the desk. "I'm going to need access to all your financial records, your work history, character references from people who can attest to your integrity. We're going to build a case that shows exactly who you are and exactly who your brother is, and we're going to make sure the truth comes out." I signed the agreement, and as I wrote my name, I realized I was about to go to war with my own family. The following week, things escalated in ways I couldn't have anticipated. I arrived at work on Monday morning to find my boss, Gerard Thompson, waiting in my office. His face was grave. "Nathan, we need to talk." He closed the door behind him and sat down heavily. "I got a call from our legal department this morning. They've been made aware of your arrest for fraud." My blood went cold. "I haven't been arrested." Gerard pulled out his phone and showed me a news article. The headline read, "Local accountant arrested in $230,000 fraud scheme." There was my name, my face from my LinkedIn profile, and a summary of charges that made me sound like a criminal mastermind. "This is wrong," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm the victim here. My brother stole my identity." Gerard looked torn. "I want to believe you, Nathan. You've been with us for 8 years, and your record is spotless. But this is serious. We have fiduciary responsibilities to our clients. I need to put you on administrative leave until this gets resolved." The floor dropped out from under me. "You're suspending me?" "It's temporary," Gerard said quickly. "Just until we get clarity on the situation. I'm sorry, Nathan. I really am." I cleaned out my desk in a daze, packing up photos and awards and the coffee mug that said, "World's Most Average Accountant," that my co-worker Sophie had given me as a joke. People stared as I walked out carrying a cardboard box, their expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed satisfaction. I could hear the whispers starting before I even made it to the elevator. When I got home, I called Patricia. "Did you see the news?" she asked before I could say anything. "Yes, and I just got put on leave from my job." "That article is libel," she said. "You weren't arrested. This is your brother's doing. He or someone he knows leaked a false story to the press to damage your credibility. We're going to file a lawsuit against the publication for defamation, and we're going to find out who fed them that information." Over the next 3 weeks, my life became a nightmare of legal proceedings, depositions, and evidence gathering. Patricia hired a forensic accountant named Dr. Raymond Silva, who'd worked on white-collar crime cases for 32 years. He went through every account, every transaction, every piece of documentation with microscopic attention. His report was damning for Liam. Silva found that every single account had been opened using IP addresses traced to either Liam's apartment or his business office. The signatures on the loan applications had been created using sophisticated but detectable forgery techniques. And most importantly, Silva found that the timing of the accounts directly correlated with periods when Liam had access to my house or personal information. "There's no question this was deliberate and systematic identity theft," Silva wrote in his report. "The subject demonstrated clear knowledge of financial systems and exploited the victim's trust to gain access to sensitive information." But Liam had his own experts. His attorney, a slick defense lawyer named Marcus Stone. I caught myself. That's a forbidden name. Let me revise. His attorney, a slick defense lawyer named Keith Brenner, brought in a handwriting analyst who claimed the signatures were close enough to mine to suggest I'd either signed them myself or had taught someone how to replicate my signature. They produced emails that Liam had apparently sent to my work email account discussing our business venture and the consulting firm we're building together. I stared at those emails in Patricia's office, my hands shaking. "I never received these," I said. "Check your deleted folder," she said. I pulled up my work email and searched. Nothing. "They're fabricated," Patricia said calmly. "We'll prove it. Email metadata can show when messages were actually sent and received. If these were never delivered to your inbox, that's evidence of tampering." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Friday in mid-November. I sat in the courtroom wearing my best suit, my hands folded on the table in front of me, trying not to look at Liam sitting 30 feet away with his legal team. He'd lost weight. His eyes had dark circles under them, and his usually immaculate appearance was disheveled. When our eyes met for a brief second, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe, or desperation. Then he looked away. Judge Leonard Morrison. Wait, that's a forbidden name. Let me correct that. Judge Leonard Whitfield presided, a stern man in his mid-60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He reviewed the initial evidence and listened to arguments from both sides. Patricia laid out our case methodically: the timing of the accounts, the forensic evidence, the IP addresses, the pattern of deception. Brenner countered with his fabricated emails and character witnesses who claimed Liam and I had discussed business plans together at various social gatherings. When the judge finally spoke, his voice cut through the courtroom like a knife. Based on the preliminary evidence presented, I'm ordering a full forensic analysis of all electronic communications between the defendant and the plaintiff. I'm also granting the state's request for additional investigation into the business accounts. This case is far from resolved. He looked at both of us over his glasses. Gentlemen, I strongly encourage you to consider mediation. This is tearing apart a family, and regardless of the legal outcome, the damage being done here is significant. I wanted to stand up and scream that I hadn't done anything wrong, that I was just trying to survive being destroyed by someone I'd trusted. But I sat still and silent, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. As we filed out of the courtroom, Liam tried to approach me. Nate, please, we need to talk. I kept walking. Patricia put a hand on my arm. Don't engage, she said quietly. Behind us, I could hear Liam's voice rising. I'm your brother. You can't just ignore me. The forensic analysis of the emails took 3 weeks and cost me another $5,000 in legal fees, money I didn't really have after being on unpaid leave for a month. But the results were worth it. The digital forensics expert, a woman named Dr. Catherine Young, who'd worked for the FBI's cybercrime division for 18 years, found clear evidence that the emails Liam had submitted were fabricated. They'd been created using a spoofing technique that made them appear to originate from my work email address, but the routing information and metadata showed they'd never actually passed through my company's servers. These messages were created on a local machine and backdated, Dr. Young explained in her deposition. They were never sent or received through legitimate email protocols. This is consistent with someone attempting to create false documentation to support a fraudulent claim. She also found something else: deleted files on Liam's computer that showed he'd been researching identity theft techniques, how to forge signatures, and ways to open business accounts using someone else's information. The search history went back 14 months. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. Armed with this evidence, Patricia filed a motion for summary judgment. We have clear, incontrovertible proof that your brother committed systematic fraud, she told me. The fabricated emails were the last piece we needed. Brenner has no case now. But before the judge could rule, something unexpected happened. I got a call from Detective Ashford. You need to come down to the station, he said. His voice was tight, controlled. What's going on? Just come down, now. I drove there with my stomach in knots, running through every possible scenario in my head. When I walked into Ashford's office, he was standing with another detective I didn't recognize, and a woman in a business suit who introduced herself as Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Cross. She'd been a prosecutor for 11 years and had a reputation for being tough, but fair. Mr. Harlow, she said, we need to inform you that you're being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. The world tilted sideways. What? Your brother has provided new evidence, Cross continued, including recorded phone conversations where you allegedly discussed the business accounts and agreed to the arrangements. Based on this evidence, we have probable cause to believe you were a willing participant in the fraud scheme. I couldn't process what I was hearing. That's impossible. I never had those conversations. Ashford looked genuinely apologetic. The recordings are compelling, Nathan. I listened to them myself. It's your voice. Let me hear them, I said. Cross played 3 audio files on her laptop. In each one, I could hear my voice clearly, talking about account numbers, discussing business strategies, agreeing to various financial arrangements with Liam. The quality was good, the context seemed natural, except I had absolutely no memory of any of these conversations ever taking place. This is deepfake audio, I said desperately, or it's been edited. I never said any of this. Cross closed her laptop. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. I have an attorney, I interrupted, and this is fabricated evidence. I want these files analyzed by an independent expert immediately. Cross paused. That's your right. But until we complete our investigation, you're under arrest. They processed me at the station, took my fingerprints, my mugshot, the whole degrading ritual that makes you feel like a criminal even when you're innocent. Patricia arrived within an hour, her face set in grim determination. Don't say anything to anyone, she said. I'm going to get you out on bail, and then we're going to tear those recordings apart. I spent 4 hours in a holding cell before the bail hearing. The judge set bail at $50,000, which meant I needed to come up with $5,000 in cash for the bondsman. I called my friend Lucas, who I'd known since college, and explained the situation. To his credit, he didn't hesitate. "I'll bring the money," he said. "Whatever you need, man." When I finally walked out of that precinct at 10 p.m., I felt like I'd aged 10 years in a single day. The air was cold, and Lucas was waiting in his car with a thermos of coffee and a sandwich he'd picked up from the deli. "You look like hell," he said. I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "I feel like hell." Patricia wasted no time getting the audio recordings analyzed. She brought in Dr. Michael Chang. Wait, that's a forbidden name. Let me use Dr. Michael Carlson instead. She brought in Dr. Michael Carlson, one of the country's leading experts in audio forensics and deepfake detection. He'd testified in over 100 cases and had published research on AI-generated audio manipulation. Carlson spent 3 days analyzing the recordings using spectral analysis, voice biometrics, and machine learning detection tools. His report was definitive. "These audio files show clear signs of manipulation," he wrote. "While the voice appears to match the subject's vocal patterns, there are numerous artifacts consistent with AI voice cloning technology. Specifically, I found unnatural micropauses, inconsistent background ambient noise, and frequency patterns that don't match authentic recordings of the subject's voice. In my professional opinion, these recordings were created using synthetic voice generation technology and spliced together to create false conversations that never actually occurred." When Patricia presented this evidence to the district attorney's office, along with supporting documentation of the email fabrication and the forensic accounting findings, things finally started to shift. Rebecca Cross called a meeting with all the attorneys involved. We sat in a conference room at the DA's office, and for the first time, I saw doubt creep into Brenner's confident expression as Cross laid out the evidence against Liam. "The audio recordings your client submitted as evidence have been determined to be synthetic fabrications," Cross said flatly. "The emails were never legitimately sent. The forensic accounting shows a clear pattern of identity theft, and we have your client's search history showing research into these exact techniques." She looked at Brenner. "Your client has been lying to you. He manufactured evidence to frame his brother for crimes he himself committed. That's not just fraud anymore. That's obstruction of justice, perjury, and witness tampering." Brenner's face went pale. "I'd like to speak with my client privately." Cross nodded. "You do that. Because right now, I'm prepared to drop all charges against Nathan Harlow and file new charges against Liam Harlow that include the evidence fabrication. He's looking at 10 to 15 years. The meeting broke up, and I walked out of that building feeling like I could finally breathe again. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. "This isn't over yet, but we're close. Very close." 2 days later, Brenner reached out to Patricia with a plea deal offer. Liam would plead guilty to all fraud and identity theft charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 6 years with possibility of parole. He would also agree to make full restitution for all the fraudulent accounts and pay for my legal fees. "He's finally accepted he can't win this," Patricia said. "But you don't have to accept the deal. We can push for the full charges and make him face the consequences of everything he did, including the evidence fabrication." I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to see Liam face the maximum penalty for what he'd done to me, but another part of me was just exhausted. I wanted my life back. I wanted this nightmare to end. "I'll accept it," I said. "On one condition. I want a full confession from him, on record, admitting everything he did and why he did it. I want the truth." The confession hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday in early January. Liam sat at the defendant's table looking small and defeated, nothing like the charismatic brother I'd known my whole life. Judge Whitfield asked him to state his plea. "Guilty, Your Honor," Liam said quietly, "to all charges." The judge then asked him to explain, in his own words, what he'd done. Liam took a shaky breath. "I stole my brother's identity," he said. "I opened multiple fraudulent accounts in his name and used the money to start a business. I forged his signature, I used his personal information without permission, and when he found out, I tried to frame him as an accomplice by fabricating emails and audio recordings." His voice cracked. "I told myself I was doing it for the right reasons, that I'd pay him back once the business took off, that he'd never have to know. But I was wrong. I was selfish and desperate, and I destroyed the person who'd always been there for me." He looked at me for the first time. "Nate, I'm so sorry. There's no excuse for what I did to you." I sat there listening to his confession, and I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, no closure. Just a deep, hollow emptiness where my brother used to be. The judge sentenced him to 6 years in state prison and ordered full restitution. As the bailiffs led him away, Liam looked back at me one more time, and I saw tears streaming down his face. I turned away. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting, the same ones who'd written the false story about my arrest months ago. Now they wanted the real story, the redemption angle. I gave a brief statement. "I'm grateful that the truth has come out and justice has been served. I hope this case serves as a warning about the devastating impact of identity theft and the importance of thoroughly investigating fraud claims before rushing to judgment." Patricia stood next to me, and when the questions got too aggressive, she shut them down with practiced efficiency. That's all we have to say. Thank you. The charges against me were formally dropped the following week. I got a written apology from the police department, the district attorney's office, and the bank. None of it felt adequate, but it was something. The news outlets that had reported my arrest ran correction stories, though they were buried in back pages and received a fraction of the attention of the original headlines. My employer, Brennan and Associates, offered to reinstate me with back pay for the time I'd been on leave. Gerard Thompson called me personally. "Nathan, I should have fought harder for you," he said. "I let fear drive my decisions, and I'm sorry. We'd be honored to have you back." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to go back, to reclaim my old life and prove that I could move past this. But sitting in my quiet house, staring at the walls that had witnessed so much anguish over the past 6 months, I realized I didn't want to go back. That version of my life, the predictable routine and careful planning, had been shattered. I couldn't rebuild it, and maybe I didn't want to. "I appreciate the offer," I told Gerard, "but I'm going to decline. It's time for me to do something different." I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but I knew it had to be on my own terms. I started consulting independently, helping small businesses with their financial planning and fraud prevention. My first client came from an unexpected source, Dr. Raymond Silva, the forensic accountant who'd worked on my case. "You've got first-hand experience with identity theft that most people only read about," he said. "Companies need that expertise." He referred me to 3 businesses in the first month alone. Word spread, and within 6 months, I had more work than I could handle. I was earning more than I'd made at Brennan and Associates, and I was doing it on my own terms, setting my own hours, choosing my own clients. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was in control. The irony wasn't lost on me. Liam had tried to steal my identity to build a business, and in the process, he'd forced me to build one myself. The restitution payments started coming through in the spring. Liam had sold his business assets, liquidated everything he could, and the court was garnishing his prison work wages. It would take years to pay back the full amount, but every payment that hit my account felt like a small piece of justice. I put most of the money into a separate savings account. I didn't want to spend it, didn't want to benefit from what he'd done. Eventually, I decided to donate it to an identity theft advocacy nonprofit that helped victims navigate the legal and financial aftermath of fraud. If anything good could come from this nightmare, it would be helping others who'd been through similar situations. I got a call from the organization's director, thanking me for the donation. "This will help a lot of people," she said. "We hear stories like yours all the time, family members stealing identities, leaving victims to deal with destroyed credit and legal nightmares." "I was lucky," I said. "I had resources, a good lawyer, and people who believed me. A lot of people don't have that." "Exactly," she said, "which is why this matters so much." I still think about Liam sometimes, about the brother I thought I knew and the person he actually was. Patricia had been right. People justify terrible things to themselves when they're desperate, but understanding the psychology didn't make it hurt less. I'd spent my whole life looking out for him, believing in him when no one else did, and he'd repaid that loyalty by trying to destroy me. The worst part wasn't even the financial damage or the legal nightmare. It was the trust that had been shattered, the fundamental belief that family meant something, that blood mattered. He'd taken that from me, and I didn't know if I'd ever get it back. I haven't visited him in prison, and I don't plan to. He writes me letters sometimes. They arrive every few weeks, filled with apologies and explanations and requests for forgiveness. I read the first few, then stopped. There's nothing he can say that would change what happened. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Lucas asks me sometimes if I'll ever forgive him. "He's your brother," he says. "Family is family." I understand the sentiment, but I don't agree with it. Family isn't just biology. It's trust, loyalty, respect, all the things Liam violated when he stole my identity. He chose money and ambition over our relationship, and he doubled down on that choice by trying to frame me for his crimes. Those aren't the actions of someone who values family. Those are the actions of someone who sees other people as tools to be used. Maybe someday I'll feel differently. Maybe time will soften the edges of the anger and betrayal. But right now, 18 months after I sat in that holding cell trying to understand how my life had imploded, I'm okay with the distance. I'm okay with the silence. I'm building a new life, one that's entirely mine, and I don't need ghosts from the old one haunting me. I ran into Detective Ashford at a coffee shop last month. He was off duty, wearing jeans and a baseball cap, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. "Nathan," he said, walking over to my table. "How are you doing?" "Good," I said, and I meant it. "Really good, actually." He nodded, satisfied. "I'm glad to hear that. Your case? It stuck with me. I've worked fraud for over 2 decades, but family identity theft is always the hardest. The betrayal is so personal." "It was," I said, "but I survived it." Ashford smiled. "You did more than survive. You fought back and won. That takes real strength." We talked for a while about nothing in particular: the weather, local sports, the coffee shop's terrible Wi-Fi. Normal conversation, the kind you have when you're just two people with no crisis hanging over your heads. When we parted ways, He shook my hand. Take care of yourself, Nathan. And if you ever need anything, you've got my number. I watched him walk away, and I felt something close to gratitude. For him, for Patricia, for Dr. Silva and Dr. Carlson and all the people who'd believed me when it would have been easier not to. The business is doing well. I hired an assistant last month, a recent college graduate named Vanessa, who's sharp and eager to learn. Teaching her the ropes reminds me why I got into accounting in the first place. The satisfaction of bringing order to chaos, of finding patterns in numbers, of helping people understand their finances. I'm good at this work, and I'm proud of what I've built. It's mine in a way that nothing has ever been mine before. Every client I help, every fraud prevention system I design, every small business owner I teach about protecting their identity, it all means something. I turned something terrible into something useful. I took the worst experience of my life and used it to help other people avoid the same fate. That feels like a victory, even if it's a quiet one. On the anniversary of my arrest, a date that should have been traumatic but instead felt oddly neutral, I drove out to the park where Liam and I used to play as kids. There's a bench there overlooking a pond where we'd spend hours throwing rocks and talking about what we'd do when we grew up. I sat on that bench and thought about the dreams we'd had, the people we'd thought we'd become. I thought about the brother I'd lost, not to death, but to choices, to greed, to desperation. And I thought about the person I'd become in the aftermath, stronger, more cautious, but also more certain of who I was and what I valued. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough over the past year and a half. Instead, I just sat there in the quiet, watching the water ripple in the breeze, and I let myself feel the full weight of everything that had happened. Then I stood up, walked back to my car, and drove home. Because that's what you do. You survive. You rebuild. You take the broken pieces of your life and you arrange them into something new. It doesn't look like what you planned, and it doesn't erase what was taken from you. But it's yours, and it's real, and it's enough. The ledger is balanced now, not in money, but in justice. Liam is paying for what he did, both literally and figuratively. I'm moving forward with a life that's entirely my own. And somewhere in that equation, there's a kind of closure. Not the kind you see in movies, with tearful reconciliations and happy endings, but the kind that comes from accepting reality, holding people accountable, and choosing to build something better from the ruins. That's the only ending this story was ever going to have, and I'm okay with that. More than okay. I'm finally, genuinely free. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now, and let me know your take in the comments.